It was always left on, soft amber, never too bright, a hallway light that buzzed faintly, not with sound, but with presence. It lived just outside your room, glowing under the doorframe like a quiet reminder that someone somewhere still cared if you found your way back. You never asked for it. You never thought much of it. But it was always there, and some nights that mattered more than the bed itself. It wasn't about the darkness, not really. You knew the way down that hall with your eyes closed. You could count the steps, feel the corners, sense the creak in the third floorboard before your foot touched it. But still, that glow, it changed something. The air felt less sharp, the silence less hollow. You could breathe more fully, knowing you weren't stepping into a night that had forgotten you. It was never bright enough to see everything, just enough to believe you'd make it. You remember once coming home late, not reckless, just delayed. Work or weather or something that didn't matter anymore. And when you opened the door, there it was, still on, still waiting. No words, no scolding, just that soft light offering you a place to land. You didn't know it then, but that glow was a kind of love you didn't have the language for yet. A kind that didn't ask where you'd been, didn't need an explanation, only wanted you to arrive safe. Sometimes love is the light left on by someone too tired to stay awake, but still hoping you'll come home. There's a kind of dark that doesn't come from night. It comes from the weight of things not said, from glances avoided, from footsteps that sound different when the hallway isn't lit. You felt it as a child, even before you had the words. When someone left too early, when someone came home too late, when voices stayed soft but strained behind half-closed doors. The hallway stayed the same, but the shadows changed shape. It wasn't about seeing clearly. It was about feeling unseen. There were nights when the light was off, not because someone forgot, but because someone was hurt or tired or giving up on the idea that someone might still walk through that door. And the darkness, it wasn't frightening, it was something worse, familiar, like the ache of a room that no longer expected return. You remember those nights in your bones. Even now, your feet slow when the hallway is too quiet. Even now, you glance down its length as if waiting for someone to speak first. But silence doesn't explain itself. And the dark never makes excuses. So we move carefully, soft-footed, shoulders braced as if walking through memory requires armor, and maybe it does. Because the shadows we walk past aren't always on the walls. Some of them live in the space between what we hoped for and what no one had the courage to name. And still, we move forward, one step, then another, because some part of us still believes in the light that waits for us, even when no one is left to switch it on. She never said she was waiting, but you knew. Even on the nights she fell asleep before you came home, the hallway light stayed on, casting its soft glow like a hand left open, palm up, just in case you needed to hold it. You'd slip through the door, careful not to make noise. And every time, you'd pause there, at the edge of the hallway, where her light met your silence. Sometimes you'd peek in. She'd be curled, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, brow furrowed even in rest, like the body couldn't forget how to worry just because the mind had gone quiet. You never turned off the light, not right away. You'd go to your room, set down your bag, change into something soft, and only then, only when the world had stopped humming, you'd walk back down the hallway and press the switch. A soft click, a ritual completed. She never asked where you'd been. She didn't need to. She left the light on not for answers, but for reassurance. It was her way of saying, you still belong here, no matter how late, no matter what weighed you down on the outside. That small glow meant you hadn't been forgotten. Years later, you'd think of that every time you left a lamp on by the window without knowing why. Because some habits aren't habits at all. They're echoes. And hers still lives in the way your hand lingers near a switch, even when the house is quiet. She was never loud about her love. She just left light behind in case you lost your way between who you'd become and who you were still trying to be. You didn't mean to. It had been a long day. No one was coming. The rooms had been still for hours. So you walked past the hallway light and flicked it off on your way to bed. Just like that. No pause. No thought. And yet, as soon as the light vanished, you felt something settle into the walls. Not darkness. Something colder than that. A kind of closing, like you'd ended something you hadn't meant to touch. You stood there, fingers still near the switch, listening for nothing in particular, and that was the hardest part. How nothing responded. The hallway didn't protest. The house didn't stir, but your chest did, a tightening, a quiet recoil, as if a ritual had been broken in a place where ritual had always been your anchor. You thought about her. About how she never turned it off until the last body had come home, about the way she let light linger even when it meant sleeping with shadows curling beneath her door. That night you turned the light back on, not because someone was coming, but because you didn't want the house to feel like it had given up, because you realized the light was never about seeing clearly. It was about saying, "We're still here." A signal to the walls, to yourself, to anyone who might find themselves in the dark and unsure. That simple glow meant the night wasn't over, that there was still space to arrive, still time to be held. And from that night on, you never turned it off early again, because you understood now, some lights aren't for the eyes. They're for the heart to know it hasn't been forgotten. It wasn't about her anymore, not entirely. At first the hallway light was memory. An echo of her fingers, the gentle way they touched the switch like closing a letter that was never fully written. But over time, you realized you were doing it for you. You weren't waiting on anyone. There were no keys jangling at midnight, no footsteps slowing near the door. Still, you'd leave the light glowing, casting its quiet path across the carpet, like a thread between rooms you no longer needed to walk through. The gesture stayed and became something else. You'd pass it before sleep, a soft check-in, a breath that said, "Today I was here," and tomorrow maybe again. Some nights you left it on because the world felt heavy, and that little pool of gold reminded you that not all endings arrive with thunder. Some come gently, with a dim bulb, a soft hum, a hallway that doesn't ask questions. You even began to place things near it. A small plant, a folded scarf, a photo turned just slightly inward. Tiny altars for moments you never wanted to name but also couldn't release. And the light, it held them. Without heat, without urgency, just illumination. Because after a while you knew the light didn't mean someone was returning. It meant someone had mattered, and still did. So you kept turning it on, not for function, not for habit, but as a ritual that said, "This is still a home, even in the quiet, even when the doors stay closed." No one comments on it now. Visitors pass the hallway without looking twice. The delivery man steps around it. The nurse adjusts her bag and moves on. But you see it. Each night your hand finds the switch almost without thought. A practiced gesture like brushing hair behind an ear or closing a drawer that never stays shut. The hallway doesn't need light. You know every step, every uneven board. You haven't needed it for years. And still, you turn it on, because the light has stopped being about function. It's become a language, a quiet way of saying, "I'm still someone who waits, even when no one is coming." You've thought about stopping. There were nights when the house felt too still to justify it, when the glow felt indulgent, a waste of power for a silence no longer shared, but something in you couldn't reach for the switch, because there's a kind of presence that exists in continuation, in doing what once mattered not because it still needs to, but because something inside you would feel too hollow if it didn't. The hallway light doesn't grieve, it doesn't remember, but you do, and that's enough. You remember what it meant, how it held a promise, however small, that there would be warmth somewhere in the house if someone found their way home. Now you leave it on even when the doors are locked, even when the tea is for one, even when the night feels more memory than moment. Because this is how legacy lingers. Not through big gestures, but through quiet ones no one else even notices. You notice. And maybe that's all light ever asked for, to be seen by the one who still believes it has a reason to shine. Some nights you pause in the hallway longer than usual, not to adjust anything, not to search, just to let the light touch your face. It's dim, almost not enough to call light at all, more like presence taking form through glow. You don't need it to see. You haven't in years. But it sees you, not with clarity, but with kindness. And at this age, that matters more. Because sight, you've learned, has nothing to do with vision. It's the way a space remembers you, the way a ritual echoes long after its meaning has shifted. That hallway. It used to be the path home. Then it became the path to check on her, then the space between your own bedroom and sleep. Now it's simply the place you still trust light to find you. A place where warmth still rises without demand, without purpose, without needing to prove anything. And in that gentle glow you are reminded you don't always need to know where you're going. You just need to feel you're not alone in the dark. So you walk past the light one more time, not to look, but to be looked after, not by anyone, but by the memory that kindness can linger in things that no longer serve a task, yet still serve the soul. And as you move forward, you carry that glow with you, not to illuminate, but to soften whatever darkness comes next. There are lights we turn on without needing to see, not because the path is unclear, but because something inside us still hopes to be gently welcomed by what waits in the quiet. The hallway is no longer a place you pass through. It's a place that remembers how you've carried grief without naming it, how you've honored presence long after it left the room. You didn't keep the light on because you feared the dark. You kept it on because you knew somewhere within you there was still a door open, still a breath waiting to arrive. And maybe that's what legacy is. Not what we leave behind, but what we continue without needing to explain it. So tonight, when your hand touches the switch, don't question the gesture. Let it glow, not for function, not for memory, but for the quiet truth that you still deserve softness at the end of the day.